Okay, so here what we're going to do today is we're going to go through the passage and sort of do like a passage outline for this first passage. This is the first passage on SAT number 10, which is like the 2017 May QAS test. And what I want to do is just sort of go through it to give you a sense of some of the things that I'm going to notice as I read through the passage. Now, the first passage on any SAT test is always a literature passage, and these are a little less clear in terms of their structure or in terms of presenting a thesis, right? So a lot of the historical passages or a lot of the scientific passages are going to present a clear thesis. With the literature passages, that's not really what we're going to get. So instead of trying to look for like a thesis in the intro, or look at the conclusion, or sort of look at that structure, we just want to get a sense of what are the series of events that take place in the story, who are the characters, what are some of the significant things that happen, and we'll take it from there. So the approach that I'm going to do for this passage today is just kind of look maybe paragraph by paragraph and point out whatever is interesting in each of the paragraphs here. So let's actually start up at the very top here. And this is basically telling us where the excerpt is taken from. And then we have the mention of this guy here, the Swede, and this is the nickname of this character here, Seymour, who is a talented athlete from the narrator's hometown. So without the rest of the context of the passage, we may not know who the Swede is or what his importance is, but we know that he is going to be important for the passage. So then we're going to start with paragraph 1. So here we're setting up the scene, the summer of 1985, etc., etc. And then we get this right here. I saw the Swede. So the Swede is first introduced in this passage, in this paragraph here, paragraph 1. And it basically explains that the narrator had watched him play baseball 36 years ago. It describes him, his golden hair was a shade or two darker. It was in this suit that fit him so exquisitely, he seemed even taller and leaner than I remembered. So there's a lot of positive attributes as he's being described. He's being described with golden hair and being tall and lean. And then the woman who the narrator's with notices him first, thinks it's the mayor, and then he says, "My God, do you know who that is? It's Swede Lvov. I told my friends. That's the Swede." So the first introduction here is the Swede. They're not trying to meet him. They happen to be at a game. Then they see him. He has a striking figure, and one of the female friends notices him, and the narrator is excited. He's like, "Oh my God, that's the Swede." So that's the first intro. So already the Swede is sort of taking a central place in the passage. So let's look at paragraph 2. This describes how there's a skinny, fair-haired boy who is the Swede's son, who's next to him. And then it shows the narrator approaches him and introduces himself. "I knew your brother at Wequakic." So it's interesting, we can kind of note that the narrator doesn't introduce himself like, "Hey, Swede, it's me. Don't you remember who I am?" He just basically says, kind of assumes that the Swede won't know who he is and says, "I knew your brother at Wequakic." And the Swede responds by saying, "You're Zuckerman, the author." And so this is the Swede recognizing who the narrator is. He's like, "You're Zuckerman, you're the author," and there's a lot of enthusiasm that's there. And then here we have, "Sure, you were Jerry's great pal." This is the Swede saying this. And because of the way the narrator introduces himself, like, I knew your brother at Wequakic," we can probably assume that Jerry is the Swede's brother. Then the Swede is like, "I don't think he had many pals." Um, and then the Swede comes down, says, "Here, so you're the guy my mother says. He was such a nice, quiet child when he came to the house. You know who this is," the Swede said to the boy, "the guy who wrote those books, Nathan Zuckerman." So this is a significant paragraph here, because here, again, the Swede is sort of recognizing, like, "I know who you are, that you're not, like, I know your name." And not only does he know his name, but he actually knows him as the author, as Nathan Zuckerman. And he actually shows enthusiasm about the books, which sort of suggests that he read the books, and he's obviously had conversations with his son about the books, because he's like, "Do you know who this is? It's the guy who wrote those books that we've been talking about, or that we read together." So there's recognition of Zuckerman from the past and also in his present accomplishments. The boy doesn't really seem to care. The Swede says, "This is my son." The narrator introduces, says, "These are all my friends." Then he recognizes the Swede as the greatest athlete in the history of Wequakic High. Compares him to another baseball player, etc. Then they leave each other. "Take it easy. Remember me to your brother. We laughed and parted." Someone is saying, well, the greatest athlete in the history of Wequakic High called you Skip. We'll talk about that one. That comes up later in one of the questions. And then here, I know I can't believe it. So obviously the narrator is himself a little bit starstruck by this former athlete from his hometown. He's really excited to meet him. He's like, no, I can't believe it. He felt singled out, probably because the Swedes still recognized him. And then here the woman with us turned to me and said, you should have seen your face. You might as well have told us you was Zeus. Zeus being the Greek god. It tells us down here, the ruler of the gods. So basically the narrator is responding. His face is lighting up as if he'd seen someone so remarkable like Zeus. And so this scene really just describes a meeting between the Swede and the narrator. The narrator is almost infatuated with the Swede. In his memory, he's this striking, heroic figure, and he still kind of feels the same way about him when he meets him. And he doesn't expect that the Swede will know who he is, but it turns out the Swede does. And not only does the Swede remember him from back when as the friend of his brother, but he also knows him as Zuckerman, the author, and he obviously respects Zuckerman for his writings. He talks to his son about it, and that's it. So they meet, they go their separate ways, and that is it. So that's basically how the passage breaks down, and we will use that to answer the rest of the questions going forward.